First of all, thank you all for coming out on this unusual rainy night. I have a great honor tonight to introduce a couple of guests before I get to Rob. Michael Smith, our county legislator, is sitting up here in the front row. And Diane Donato Roth, town councilman. And John Cronin. We'll get right into the program, and this is actually a great honor for me because it's really a pleasure to introduce a elected official who actually fulfilled the promises he made when he was running for office. And for the third consecutive year, the County of Westchester has had no tax increase in their budget. Now, this is in spite of escalating double-digit pension and medical costs, so it's no small feat to be able to do that. And Rob's going to tell us how he's going to do that again. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Rob Astorino, our county executive.
Thanks, Howard. Thank you. I got this. Yeah. Thank you for coming. We were going to get you home early, but since the Yankee game was postponed because of the rain, we're going to be here till like 10 o'clock. So we will hopefully, I think what we'll try to do is I'll spend a little time just going over some things about the county, what we've been dealing with, and we'll talk, of course, I'll mention about the housing settlement, and then open it up to questions. Anything that you have a question about, just fire away. Did want to mention Legislator Smith, who is in his first term as your county legislator. I had the privilege of being county legislator for North Castle as well. I live in Mount Pleasant, so I'm very familiar with North Castle because I have to admit I have Wildcat blood in me, not Bobcat. I am a Westlake Wildcat graduate of 1985, and back then, Westlake and Byram Hills, for those of you who remember, was the rivalry. I mean, it was a huge rivalry between our two schools. Unfortunately, it's fallen by the wayside over the last couple of decades, I guess, since probably the 90s. But it was fierce and it was fun, and we had some great football games and great basketball games. So I'm very familiar certainly with North Castle, and I appreciate everything that the town board does. The supervisor has been an amazing supervisor to work with here in North Castle. We got to know each other, unfortunately, too well during the Hurricane Sandy. We spent a lot of time up here in the EOC and on the phone and throughout. So I appreciate everything the town board does. And Legislator Smith has been an amazing partner in county government, and he really has been an advocate for you. But really, we get along very well. We see eye to eye on a lot of things, but when we don't, we work it out. But he's been great. So here's what I want to talk about tonight. When I first got into office in 2010, you have to sort of set the bar and let the administration understand what it is we stand for and what it is we're trying to do, and let the public know in pretty simple terms what it is we're trying to do as well. So we go by what's called 3 Ps: protecting the taxpayer, preserving essential services, and promoting economic growth. Those are the 3 things that we deal with all the time. From the commissioners to the employees, that is what I want them to understand what we're about. So what are the 3 Ps? Well, the first one is pretty self-explanatory. When I ran in 2005, I lost. When I ran in 2009, I won, but the message was really the same. I ran on the same thing both times. And I really, really strongly believe, I don't know how many here have little kids, maybe some are grown up, maybe I have grandchildren now. When I ran in 2009, I had a decision to make because I was working in the city. My wife and I have little kids. Now they're getting a little older. My son is going to be 10 next month. My daughter is 8, and my other daughter is 3. And so when I ran in 2009, I had to decide, do I want to leave New York City where I was working and run for this again? And it was important to me because I really felt very strongly that the county was going on the wrong direction, with taxation and spending and making it difficult for businesses. And so I had to make a choice, and I felt I should fight for what I believe in. And if I lost, I lost, but I really wanted to let people understand what was at stake. And so with little kids, my wife and I were like most people in this county. We want to be able to live here for quite a long time. We want our kids to be able to live here and go to schools. I would love nothing else for my son who just started playing football a year ago, this past year. I would love nothing more than for him to be dressed up in a Westlake Wildcat uniform playing the Byram Hills Bobcats, if we can still live where we do, and that's why I got involved. So what do we do, and what was it like? The 5 years before we got here, taxes and spending were going crazy in the county, for whatever reason, but they were going crazy. You know, the 5 years before we got here, spending was up, and so was taxes. The tax levy was up 17% in those 5 years. In the last 3 years, we have reduced the tax levy by 2%. Now, no one's life is going to change dramatically, I get that, but look what the arrow is doing. The arrow is not going up, the arrow is going down. And that means, at least for the county portion of your tax bill, which we are responsible for, we have made sure that we're living within our means in this county to make it easier for you and businesses to stay. So that's what has happened with taxes, and I'm proud of that. It's not easy to do that, by the way. We have to make, real choices, because to not make choices means everything just perpetuates, and that's where you get 17% tax increases. Well, how do we do it? Well, obviously, we had to make sure that we controlled spending, because you can't spend and spend and spend like they were, and you have to pay for that. And how do you do it here? It's property taxes. So we said, well, we've got to figure out a way to start reducing spending. We came in, it was a $1.8 billion budget. We're down to $1.7 billion. So in a real way, in a responsible way, we have worked, and Legislator Smith has been, every step of the way the last 2 years has been just as responsible for this. We made sure that we, in a reasonable way, found spending reductions. We've also had a reduction in the workforce. And one of the ways that we did that was through an incentive program when we first got there, and a lot of people took that. So the last budget that we did, we had to set goalposts. And the goalposts were pretty simple. We were not going to raise the tax levy, and we were not going to lose our AAA credit rating. Those were the guarantees. I was not moving from them. I was not budging from them. But everything in between, we could talk about. We could negotiate. We can find compromises. Plenty of line items in that budget where we could figure out what to do. But that we were not compromising on. And I was proud that the budget, not only that I submitted, but that was adopted bipartisan with 9 votes. It was 2 Democrats and 7 Republicans came together and compromised. We worked out our differences, and we passed a budget that was responsible. And that culminated with a lot of hard work, but we got it done. And so we're proud of that. And we kept to our principles. And we made sure that the other parts of the budget where people need help, and we'll talk about that as well, they were being served as well. So that's the budget aspect. Those are the money aspect of this. The second P in this whole protecting taxpayers is preserving essential services. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about the structural problems that we're dealing with, that the supervisor and town board here in North Castle are dealing with, school districts are dealing with, and those are the structural problems. They are nasty because a lot of it we don't control. Pensions, Medicaid, unfunded mandates. You've heard about this thing, right? Unfunded mandates. Well, what is it? It's a higher level of government, in this case mostly the state, but sometimes the federal government, dictating to a lower level of government what must be done, what programs must be provided. And oftentimes there's not enough money in the aid that they give to cover it, or sometimes none at all. So we're eating up our budgets to pay for their programs. And in the case of the county, there are 9 programs, 9, that consume 85 cents of every dollar you send to the county in your property tax bill. Think about that for a second. 85 cents of every dollar you send in your tax bill to the county goes right up the thruway to Albany for some of their programs. Medicaid is the biggest one. $225 million out of the county budget goes directly to pay for Medicaid, which we have no control over whatsoever on that program. Nothing. Now, we look at pensions. This is crazy numbers. When you look at this is scary because it's the same for everybody. Look at what happened. In 2001, our total bill for pensions in Westchester County government was $3.3 million. Last year, $81 million. This year, $91 million. Next year, $95 million. Could be higher. That's a bill we get from the state for the retirement system we have to pay. So when you think about it, You take that 85 cents of every dollar, we've got a dime and a nickel left locally to pay for the things that we want or still must pay for, like contracts for our employees, health insurance, parks. I mean, there are things that we want to do too. So there's not a lot left in the property tax. And it drives me crazy when I hear state legislators or the governor or anybody saying that we, the state, are not in a position to subsidize local government in the counties. Well, let's look at the math for a second. We get about $225 million in state aid. We send to Albany $450 million out of your property tax. So who's subsidizing who? That's a complete imbalance that needs to be fixed. And we've made a charge on this Stop Albany, which I'll talk about in a little bit. That's really important. And this is where you can come in because you have got to get more engaged. You've got to be able to make sure that you let your legislators, state legislators, and the governor know that we've got to put an end to this because this is where it's out of control. This is where the trains are off the tracks. And we don't have much room on a local level, nor do we have much authority on a local level. It's all the state stuff that's really crushing everybody. So stopalbany.com is what you should do. I think you have it all in your packets tonight. Send that in. Let them know. Let them know that you've got to start changing the habits in Albany because their spending is what is affecting us on a local level. The second thing is preserving essential services. Now, this is where I know it gets subjective. What's essential to me may not be essential to you or whatever. But essential services, in my definition, would be something that is beneficial to everybody or does the most good or government should be doing it. You know, roads and bridges, those are essential services. The Beeline bus system, our transportation network, those are essential to help the poorest among us be able to keep a job and get on transportation that they can afford to get to work. And for those employers, by the way, to have a network that can get employees to their jobs. That's essential. You know, the county airport, that's something that we're doing. That's important. It's important to the economy. It's important to businesses. Those are essential. There are other essential things. Those are the human needs that we have in this county, and we've got a lot of those, by the way. You know, and one of the things that, as I go around, and especially during this period of time, you know, you see faces that you never would imagine, including people here in Armonk or Banksville or North White Plains that would be on a line for food. You know, so we have an absolute need to make sure that people are taken care of during this time, and sometimes it's long term. But you know, to prevent homelessness, that's something we need to do, and we do it. And we're getting people, by the way, and our social services commissioner is here tonight. We are getting people out of temporary shelters and into permanent housing quicker. That's the goal. We want people to get into permanent housing. Children, you know, we don't want foster kids to be shipped upstate where they're completely away from the community that they know or family members. We want them in loving homes. We want them adopted. That's what we want to do, and that's part of our Department of Social Services, which has been doing a great job, and our commissioner has been amazing on the fiscal aspect because it's huge. It's over $500 million, and of course on the human need aspect. So those are important things that we must and we can do. And I am proud to say, by the way, despite what you've heard, because what you hear is sometimes very different than the facts, and these are the facts. Nowhere and no time ever in the history of this county has any administration ever spent more on the Department of Social Services than we have. And that's something I'm proud of, because we do have people in need, and we have added in real dollars $17 million more in tax dollars to the Department of Social Services than ever before. And I'll give you an example, by the way. When under the expansion of Medicaid, really on the federal level, when we got that stimulus money, which went into social services, but when that went away in a couple of years, we were left with a $40 million hole. Now, we could have done one thing and said just, okay, do away with programs and forget the needs, or we could have made up the difference. We chose to make up the difference, and that was not easy, but we did that. And that's the commitment that we've had. So that's where social services is, and I'm proud of that. One quick thing as we move over to safer communities, and we're running through some of these so we can get to your questions, and I know it's hot in here too. Safer Communities was born out of December 14th, a day that none of us will ever forget, having lived so close to Newtown. But I remember that day very, very well, as I bet you probably did. I was driving around the county and heard it on the radio. I got to the office and I put the TV on and I just sort of, I got very emotional sitting in my chair thinking about my kids, and then thinking about parents, what they're going through over there. And it's unimaginable, something like that. And that night, it was a Friday, that night we canceled everything that I had that night and the whole weekend. And I just wanted to be home and deal with this as a parent because it was all over the news. They were going to see this, and how do you deal with this? And I remember that night around the kitchen table, the kids, they're smarter than you think and more observant than you know, right? My 9-year-old says to me, what would we do if a shooter came into our school? And that's not an easy question to answer. And he said that he would try to escape. And my daughter, the 8-year-old, said that she would try to play dead or hide. And they said to me, Daddy, what's right? How do you answer? I don't know. How do you answer that question? They're probably both right, or maybe they're wrong. I don't know. And so, I thought all weekend we got to do something, but I don't want to just do something irrational just to say we did something or to have a headline. If we're going to do something, how do we do it that actually has an effect long term? So that Monday, we got all the commissioners together, and I said, look, can we do something? We are not starting a new bureaucracy. We're not throwing more money at a problem because we don't have money. Are there things that we can actually do collectively in this county that could actually make our schools safer? Is that even our role? I don't know. And what came out of that was, yeah, we can do things because we already have these issues that we've been dealing with. And it's very clear. I mean, if something were ever to happen here in Byram Hills or wherever, it's not going to be just the North Castle Police Department that's going to be going to the scene. It's going to be everybody. It's going to be state police, county police, Mount Pleasant police. Everyone is going to be responding to this in very scary equipment. The special response team is going to be in, fatigues and very scary equipment with big guns and bomb-sniffing dogs and aviation and everything else you can imagine is going to be there. So what's the right thing and wrong thing for parents to do and administrators and teachers? So we got everybody together, and in February, we had, for the first time in the history apparently, every school district, every public, private, parochial, and every law enforcement agency, including Homeland Security, FBI, everybody in one room in SUNY Purchase. And we just talked about what are the best practices, because if this school district knows what to do and is drilling and a different school district hasn't, then how do you put them together? And you got to break down the silos. So we had a very, very good discussion and a very frank discussion on the law enforcement end. The second aspect is uncomfortable because that's the mental health aspect of this, which tends to be put aside, and nobody wants to deal with that because you're dealing with children. You're dealing with mental health laws and privacy laws, et cetera. But that is a huge aspect of this. And so in April, we got everyone together from not just law and school, but we also had all the mental health professionals. And we put nonprofits and religious all in a room. And then again, we were talking about best practices, what's working, what's not. And from that now is a blueprint that's being developed by the people in that room to come out with something that will be shared by all. So something positive hopefully will come out of all of this and make our schools a little bit safer. Sandy, ugh, I don't even want to talk about her. But you know what? We're just entering the hurricane season, and today we had a tabletop drill in the county center with the local elected officials and police and emergency services and some of the other. And basically it was, look, let's pretend, we've been through this, but if a hurricane hit, a more powerful one, by the way, the two hurricanes, Sandy and Irene, that hit were tropical storms when they hit, and they did that much damage. What if a Category 3 hurricane actually made landfall here? The devastation, how would we deal with that? Well, we've had unfortunately, some good practice, but through that, we've learned a lot. We've learned about what Con Ed and NYSEG did and didn't do correctly, and certainly one of the biggest failures was they did not communicate with you. And you were left in the dark, figuratively and literally, because you couldn't find out the answers to your questions, like, when am I going to get my power back on? Because it's starting to get cold. And I was in this room with Howard and others in this room, and Mike was there talking to people who were displaced, who were coming here not just for warmth, but to recharge their iPhones and get caught up and get a little semblance of reality back in their life because everything was turned upside down. Con Ed wasn't communicating, and we are not their spokesperson. But sometimes public doesn't know, and you know what, they just want answers. And so one thing that we found was Con Ed's crews that were working here, because this was a hard-hit community, by the way, and your crews were ready to go, but they can't cut down a tree on a wire in the middle of the road unless Con Ed says that wire is dead or that wire needs to be killed, it's still alive. And so unfortunately there was paralysis in a lot of communities. And so how do you get from, you have a crew here, but they're not empowered because the decisions are being made in central command by Con Ed. How do you get the decisions made here on the ground by the people who should be making the decisions, your local elected officials, with the utilities? And that's what's come out of this. So Con Ed has made some good improvements, we feel, and we're hoping that in the next storm, these best practices are actually put into place. And one of the things that I was able to do is when we all met, and through my own observation in every community, is take the information we learned, and I sat down with the CEO of Con Ed and with NYSEG, New York State Electric and Gas, separately, and went over things that need to improve. Went over things that we felt very strongly would make a difference going in the future. And that's something that hopefully will bear some fruit in the next storm. And the last thing is promoting economic growth. And this is important because we all want to make sure that the IBMs of the world stay here in Armonk, or the Pepsis of the world stay in Purchase and in Westchester. And one of the things I had to confront a couple months into my first days on the job really was Governor Patterson, in his infinite wisdom, said, we need a sugar tax to raise more money. And Pepsi said, oh yeah, okay, thank you, we're going to go to Plano, Texas. And with it, 1,000 jobs would be displaced, and you'd have a corporate world headquarters which would be mothballed. And so we lobbied very, very hard to make sure that we can kill that tax, which we and others did, thankfully. But we also wanted to meet, and we did, with the executives of PepsiCo. We want you to stay, so what can we do to help? And we, along with the state, worked, and they decided to take an incentive. And not only are they going to stay, by the way, they're knocking down their whole world headquarters. They're going to invest $250 million into a new one, which is going to put a lot of people in the trades back to work, but they're also going to expand over there. So that's great news. And there are other things like that. Atlas Air, which is in Purchase, one of the biggest world freight companies you've never heard of, but they're right here, 450 people. They too are going to leave because the governor of South Carolina was on the phone with them every day. And so you've got to reach out, which we have done, and you work with the state, and you work with our county IDA and our Director of Economic Development to let businesses know they are welcomed here. So that's defense, though. What do you do for offense? We want people to understand that we do want small businesses to take that chance on Main Street here. We want people to invest. When they have that idea, we want them to stay here. So we can help them. Our small business initiatives, we can get them that little boost that they might need. Captain Lawrence Beer, which I could use right now, would be really good. Captain Lawrence Beer in Westchester started, guy grew up in Lewisboro, had an idea, and was he going to Princeton? Villanova. He was going to Villanova. He was taking law, I think, right? Accounting. And he said, you know what, I don't think I want to be an accountant. I want to be a beer brewer. So how do you think that conversation went at home with his parents, right? But anyway, this guy had a great idea and started a little place in Pleasantville. And from that, was able to expand a little bit. And then we worked with him in the county to give him that little boost that he needed He's now has a big brewery in Elmsford, which is just taking off. And I really, in 10 years, I see this guy, Captain Lawrence Beer, as the next Boston Lager, Sam Adams. I really do. And it would be no better story to tell in the future than to have this brewery right here, fermenting, if you will, right here in Westchester County. So we are working with the small businesses too, and it's difficult because not only the economy, but we want to make sure that if you have a small business idea or you are a small business, come to the county because we might have an incentive that could help. Maybe we can't, but you know what? If you don't communicate with us, we'll never know. So come on up. And that's for nonprofits too. Nonprofit groups like hospitals, Northern Westchester Hospital, White Plains Hospital, we created a local development corporation which gives them access to interest-free or low-interest loans. And this gives them the opportunity sometimes to refinance and do major development at their facility, capital improvements, and expansions, and their hirings. And that's a good thing. And that's for our nonprofits. Okay, let's get to the goodie, right? The housing settlement. And I'll take any questions afterwards on any of this, but let me just give you a real brief synopsis of what the housing settlement is and what it's not and where we're at. The county was sued in 2006 under the False Claims Act of 1863 by a group out of New York City. And the county, it was alleged that the county did not do what it was supposed to do on its certifications to the federal government. In taking money from HUD and the federal government, the county is supposed to do an analysis every year and certify that they did the analysis. And they did not study whether someone's race is an impediment to fair housing choice. So in 2009, the county decided to settle when the federal government intervened. And HUD and Justice decided to settle with the county instead of going to trial. And this is what the terms are. The county, beginning the first day I took office, by the way, January 1st, 2010, the county has 7 years to build 750 units of what's called fair and affordable housing. It's based on economics, nothing else. It's based on income. Under HUD's guidelines, it's low income in 31 eligible communities. An eligible community is defined under the 2000 census. If a community has 7% or less Hispanic, 3% or less African American, then it is an eligible community under the settlement, and that's where the county and the communities must build this housing. We've got 7 years to do it, $51 million to build, at least $51 million. The county has to build at least 750 units of this. If we do not meet benchmarks along the way, the county will get significantly fined. So it's in our best interest, and the good news is we are well ahead of schedule. So where are we right now? Well, at the end of 2013, at the end of this year, the county must have 300 units of the 750 in place with financing. We are at 386 today. So we are well ahead of schedule. And we're doing that because we're working with communities and finding locations and building this housing, working with developers and finding locations. Now, you would think that that is actually good news. It is to me. It should be to you. We're complying, we're getting there. But, as the federal government has admitted, that's not really what this is all about. This is about changing communities in the view of Washington. And what they're doing is equating zoning and discrimination and saying it's because of zoning that discrimination and segregation exists in all of our communities. Now, I completely and utterly reject that idea, and I'll tell you why. Zoning and discrimination are two very different things. Is there discrimination? Is there, unfortunately, racism in this world? Of course there is. Nobody's going to deny that. For the history of this earth, there's been, and there always will be, unfortunately. But is discrimination something that, A, I tolerate personally or as county executive? No. Is it something that is perpetuated by communities? No. If there's a real estate agent who refuses to show a house or a neighborhood or a school district and steers somebody in one direction as opposed to anywhere, then that is a problem. But there are laws on the books about that. And that real estate agent or agency would suffer the consequences for that, either through the Human Rights Commission or the laws that are on the books. That's wrong. But zoning and discrimination are two separate things. Zoning prohibits or permits what can be built in a community and where, not who lives there. Two very different things. So in a community like North Castle, you might have areas where there are 1 acre zoning, you would have 1/4 acre zoning, etc. And that district, that zoning district, obviously is open to anybody. The impediment, by the way, for housing is pretty simple. It's called economics. It's income. It's what you can afford. Anybody. Believe me, there are a lot of places here, Howard, that I would love to live in. I can't afford it.
You and me both.
But that's not the issue. Anybody who can afford that can buy it, and God bless them. I live in a 1/4 acre residential in Hawthorne. That's what we can afford. We started in a condominium in Pleasantville, and when Sean came, we realized quickly we need more room, we need a house, and we were able to buy a home on a 1/4 acre piece of lot. If you read these letters, by the way, that I hope you all read tonight, in one of those letters, the federal government now is even saying that 1/4 acre single-family residential is potentially discriminatory. Now, I don't know where we're going with this. I do know where they're going, and that's what's frightening, and that's why we are at loggerheads with the federal government. Because in this letter of March 13th of this year, the federal government pretty much lists it all out there. I mean, I'm not guessing on this, by the way. I'm not guessing. This is written out in these letters. It says that potentially restrictive practices, that is, things that should not be in a zoning code because the federal government feels they are restrictive and they are exclusionary and they perpetuate segregation in the federal government's view. Any restrictions on height, on density, on lot size, on number of bedrooms permitted in a development or a unit, on water or sewer protections, on environmental like watershed property, any of that is an excuse in a zoning code to keep people out. That's the federal government's view. What that zoning does is protect areas from overdevelopment, from watershed being polluted, from a bomb factory being built next to a school. I mean, that's what zoning is. That's what zoning is for. This is a home rule state, by the way. Under the New York State Constitution, the authority to plan and zone is up to the town board, the planning board, the zoning board, local, not the federal government. And so the issue here is the federal government, in what they have described Westchester as their grand experiment. Those are the terms that they use, not us. They say that Westchester is their grand experiment, and what they do here and how far they push and how far they get is what they're going to do around the country, and they are beginning to do that, by the way. They are really going after the county and our municipalities on zoning. And if you don't believe me, fine. Read these letters and you will understand exactly what is at stake. So what is at stake? If your neighbor decides to sell his or her home, if there are no restrictions in zoning codes in your neighborhood on any of that stuff, on height, on density, or whatever, then what will go next to you is a question mark. It can be either a multifamily house, development, if they can squeeze it on the property, whatever it is. It could be an apartment, maybe a retail. But if there are no zoning rules for HUD, there are no zoning rules for developers either, by the way, nor for a local municipality. So that's what's at stake here. So understand what's in these letters, because it is scary what faceless bureaucrats in D.C. are trying to do here. So the choice is it local town who decides what gets built and where in North Castle, or Washington, D.C., choosing who lives where and how? That's really what this is all about. And the federal government has said to us that they want us to go beyond the four corners of the settlement, to do what's not in the settlement, to reach these goals of theirs. And I've refused to do that. I said, we'll do whatever's in the settlement, whatever's in the contract between the two parties, county and the federal government, we'll do. I'm not arguing that. I don't like it, but I'm doing it. I have to do it. We should do it. And we're ahead of schedule. Leave us alone, we'll get there. But they're demanding that we do things that are not in the settlement, and that is where I draw the line. And the question is, who is going to determine what North Castle will be today and down the line? North Castle or D.C., period. So please, please, please read these letters. There's a lot at stake here, a lot at stake. And you hear gobbledygook from all over the place. But if you can read a letter, you'll understand what's going on. And these letters are from Washington, D.C. on HUD letterhead. The Monitor also, the Monitor who is supposed to oversee this, the Monitor is hired by HUD and can be fired by HUD at any point. So the Monitor is supposed to be a referee. He has written letters, which is very confusing now to the communities. He has injected himself on the zoning issue and has written letters to the communities and has now started to look at a 2004 study by Rutgers University, which was never adopted by the county, which went into a file, does not have the force of law, was not ever part of the settlement. But this study says, by the way, that there's a need of 10,768 affordable housing units throughout the county. And they allocate a number to each community. My town, Mount Pleasant, gets 975. That's well more than the whole settlement itself. North Castle, your number is 666. So they take this settlement, start expanding it, take a study from 2004 that has no bearing whatsoever on this, and now start to write letters to the town board and say, hey, where are you, by the way, on that 666 units you're supposed to be building? Excuse me? And that's their response. They're under no obligation to do that. But the federal government is saying, well, wait a minute. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And your zoning, by the way, must be exclusionary if you're not building this. And that's the case that they're trying to build. And that is why we're throwing the red flags up and saying, And the more you know about what they're trying to do, the better educated you will be and the more you will talk. Because if we just pretend it's not going to happen, watch. So this is what we're dealing with. And this is when the letter that the Monitor wrote to North Castle in March. One quote, additional actions will be needed for the town to make meaningful progress towards meeting its affordable housing obligation under the settlement. I mean, this is what we're dealing with now. And so unless we band together on something like this, this is Republican and Democrat. I had a press conference last week on these letters the Monitor sent. We had Republicans and Democrats. Everyone is understanding now, these communities, what we're up against. So, on the housing settlement, I am, by the way, extraordinarily proud of this county and its diversity. We now have a minority population of 46% in Westchester County. 46%. In the 10 years, from the 2000 census to the 2010 census, we had a 56% increase in those 31 communities. People choosing to live where they can afford to live, where they want to live, without the federal government dictating terms and trying to overturn zoning and telling people where they should live. And I'm proud of the diversity of this county. I really and truly am. But I will not be sitting here bullied or threatened by the federal government to try to overturn and make us do things that are not in the settlement and which will turn the town of North Castle and everything else upside down. Okay, so please, your homework assignment, read the Monitor's report, westchestergov.com. That was our press conference last week. That's the familiar guy up front there. And read the letters that we've given you, please. Okay, so now I'm going to start taking questions in a second. What can you do? First, please stay in touch with me. One of the things I found out the most during the hurricanes, by the way, when the power was out and you couldn't have cable and you didn't understand what was going on in this world, we stayed in touch through Facebook and Twitter. That's how I really got information out. And wherever I went, we were answering questions from the public. And And so it was a real beneficial way. So I ask you to please like me, be my Facebook friend, follow me on Twitter. And if you ever need any questions answered, just send us a note, email, or call us up at the office and we will get an answer. Okay, with that, it's nice and hot in here. Let me ask any questions that you might have.
We have a couple of microphones. Ask everybody just to ask one question. We want to get it in. We got about 20 minutes or so. And then why don't we start with you?
Hi, my name is Jill Salawana.
Hi, Jill.
How are you?
Good.
It's a pleasure to be here and
Thank
meet
you
you.
for coming.
Talking about Hurricane Sandy,
Yeah.
there's a lot of seniors in this room. I know I'm not the only one in that boat at this point. Food that was lost to Hurricane Sandy without a week's worth of 10 days worth of electricity hit us hard twice. Oh man. FEMA was no help. Red Cross, no help. Con Ed states it's an act of God. What plans does the county have to help us out?
Well, one of the things, we were, I think, the only county, is that correct, outside of New York City? We were the only county for the DSNAP program?
The only one that had a full DSNAP program.
This was,
Wants to get an extension.
yeah. We asked right away, the federal government made some temporary assistance available for supplemental nutrition programs, and we had a huge, what was the total amount, 6,000? How many people? We went into that program immediately. We were one of the only ones in the state that did it, and we were able to get temporary assistance for people during this program.
We applied for that, and the letters that I got back stated our income was too high for it. There was a whole bunch of, and after a while, I just gave up with phone calls. People in social services don't return your calls. I never understood what was going on, and to be quite frank, I lost over $1,600 of food with the two storms. It was my freezers, everything, because I buy food when it is on sale and put it in my freezer so I don't have to pay up and down.
Right.
And with both my husband and I out of work, every nickel counts.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to the Con Ed question. They do have spoilage, but I don't know what the specifics were to that one. I apologize.
They say it's an act of God, so they're not responsible.
Mm.
Who wants to be next?
Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
Linda Fernberg.
Hi, Linda.
As a retired law enforcement officer, I would like to know how you feel about New York State's Safety Act. I happen to have an issue with the law restricting magazines to hold only 7 bullets. This particular part of the law lacks foresight since there are not many, if any, magazines manufactured that hold only 7 bullets. And as it stands now, the law is interpreted that you cannot load a magazine with more than 7 bullets. And 7 bullets seems to be an arbitrary number. So I was wondering your position regarding the bill as a whole, if you agreed with it, or do you have specific
Well,
sections that you agree or disagree with?
This was a perfect example of rushing to get something done in response to this tragedy. And it wasn't thought out well because a couple issues. First of all, what the Journal News did, by the way, I was absolutely and utterly opposed to and spoke out right away. It was December 20, I hosted John Gambling's WR morning show occasionally, and it was December 26th that I was on, and the Journal News had published it, I think, the 23rd or the 24th, published all the names and addresses of people with pistol permit holders. And they're on their map, which I thought, I don't care what they say this past Sunday in their paper, that certainly put people potentially at risk, and that was the issue, where you had current law enforcement, retired law enforcement, victims of domestic violence, people who have businesses. They went through a process to get a pistol permit, and that, by the way, is not an easy process. You have to pass all background checks, have a very clean record, take safety courses, all this stuff. So people who legally and lawfully apply for a pistol permit and have that should not have been outed, if you will, or put at risk. So I had a big problem with that. The thing you're talking about, this was part of the issue that we said on our level, look, I don't want to run out and try to grab a stupid headline. I want to, if we're going to do something, is it going to actually work, and is it going to be something that is going to be effective? And so we took our time. We took 2 months, 2.5 months to really understand the whole issue with safety in schools and what were the lessons learned from Columbine and Virginia Tech and the Sikh Temple, et cetera. And there was a lot that was learned from each one of those, by the way. And so when we got all of law enforcement and education together, that's what was really important. I mean, are we going to learn and we're going to do something from that? You know, specifically to the issue of the number of bullets, I mean, that's an instance where you can feel good all you want about something. That is not going to correct the problem. That is just, it's not. There's a mental health issue in this that is really important that has to be looked at. That's a bigger component of this. And I just can't imagine a scenario where there is a potentially criminally insane person doing an act like that who is going to actually count the number of bullets in his gun. I mean, really. But what happened was, by the way, every active police officer in New York State, including all the county police and local police, were in violation of the New York SAFE Act because their guns, standard issue, generally were 15 rounds or not 7. And so they were all literally in violation of the state law that was passed. That's how quick it went without any thought given to it.
What about the ban on assault weapons, though? Do you have a...
That's a whole separate, you know, that's a federal issue that they need to deal with. Well, I think, look, there's some issues that we should be dealing with locally, and then there's the state, I mean, the federal issues that they can't even agree on. I mean, you know, it's not, New York State, we live here, but New York is very diverse, by the way. You've got suburbia, you got New York City, you got upstate, and very different opinions, by the way. And it's the same thing nationally. You know, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, depending on the state that they live in, they all have very different views on this. They couldn't even get together in Washington, D.C., and this is where it's got to be done. It can't be done here. It's got to be done in Washington on a national issue and a national level.
We have a question right here.
Hi, Ken McGee. I'd like to know, all right, so we get more briefed on the particulars of the housing settlement, but upon becoming so informed, what actions are available to us? Are the mandates of the settlement concrete, or are they subject to being reviewed for their lawfulness, or what actions remain open?
Well, there are certainly some concrete terms in that settlement, 750. You know, it says at least. And you know, the Deputy Secretary of HUD came to Westchester 2 weeks ago and said that that 750 number is a floor, not a ceiling. Well, you know what? We get to 750, it's a floor. It can very well be a floor. And my question to HUD and the monitor is, when we get to 750, are we done or not? Because the terms of the settlement says that's it. You build at least 750, so if we go to 751, are we done or not? They're saying and implying and writing letters to communities saying, not really, no. I mean, that's not the spirit of this. Well, you know what? This is a contract. We're going to do what's in there. And so when we get to 750, if we turn the lights out, are we going to be harassed forever? Part of the problem with this settlement was written very sloppily. It was. And it is open-ended to some extent because we have to produce what's called an analysis of impediments. I was telling you before about what got the county in trouble in the first place. We have to produce an analysis that is acceptable to HUD. Now, let me put this in context. A typical analysis of impediments by any community in the country, a state, a county, Sonoma County we've looked at, Portland, the city of Portland, you go on and on. Their analysis of impediments is 5 to 10 pages long, with no mention of zoning whatsoever. Approved, 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 approved. We are now being held to a very different standard. We now have the 7th version. We've been rejected 6 times, and our analysis is 2,000 pages long. 2,000 pages long, and they continuously reject it. So in their view, this will stay open-ended forever until it is acceptable to HUD. Now, the problem is, what they want to be acceptable is not acceptable to us. We have done our studies. We've looked at all 853 zoning districts in this county, including the ones that are not in the eligible communities. And we came to the conclusion that there is no exclusionary zoning in this county. Every community has been building affordable housing on its own. Every community permits in multiple areas of its community, areas for higher density housing or townhouses or condos or affordable housing. And Pace University then did a study, independent, because it was rejected. So Pace University independently looked at it. They came to the same conclusion that we did. And yet they continue to say no, 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 now to the seventh time, basically. And so I don't know where it's leading, but we are not going to change the facts, which is really what they want us to do. They want us to reach their conclusion and put in there things that are not true.
Is there anything we can do?
What you can do is, let me tell you something. First of all, we need the governor and our federal delegation to become helpful to the county. We need them to be on our side as opposed to silent. You know, we're dealing with a runaway federal agency, and seemingly everyone's on the sidelines like it's not their battle. It is their battle. It's their battle to protect the county and our communities and to be our voice. And, you know, we've gotten little bits of help here and there, but nothing to the extent we should be getting. So I think when you read this, I think part of it is to let our federal delegation know how you feel. And the more that you stay involved, the better everyone's going to be. Because what they are hoping, first of all, they thought I was just going to roll over, and we're not. And neither are some members of the legislature like Michael Smith. And now the towns are getting involved because they were dragged into this by the monitor on things that we feel are way off base. So you need to be educated and follow up on this.
Yep.
Oh, get you.
Ellen Solomon. I've
Hi,
been
Ellen.
living in this community for 24 years. First, I'd like to thank you for being here and for being so forthcoming and
Thank you.
so candid about the housing situation and everything else. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'd also like to change the agenda, if I may,
Sure.
and just ask you if you could be as honest with us about the Women's Equality Act.
Uh-huh.
And are you supportive of it? How fully? Are there any
I-
points that you might disagree with? What are they?
I am supportive of 9 of the 10.
Uh-huh.
And the 10th one is what's not getting it passed in the Senate. And the governor has tried to make some changes, but that's where they're having a big problem.
Could I ask you to please fill in everybody if they're not aware of
On the
10th?
abortion issue,
Right.
to allow abortion up to 9 months. I do not agree with that. Not at all. And I don't think, you know, whether people agree with that or not is their personal opinion. I do not believe that abortion on demand up to 9 months is something that we should be allowing. John.
Question.
Thank you. John Bona. Rob, what is your position on Indian Point remaining open, and will Westlake Drive ever open up again by the bottom of the dam?
Oh, good. That's right. That's right. Indian Point. Certainly have been very consistent since actually I first ran for county legislator in 2003. And I don't think it was as, you know, the public opinion was actually probably different back then. I've been consistent saying that I strongly feel unless there is a real viable alternative to bring in that percentage, that kind of electricity that we need, unless people want to live like they did during Hurricane Sandy, where you're going to have outages all the time, 30% of this region gets its power from Indian Point. And, you know, to just say close Indian Point tomorrow it's irresponsible without a plan to replace it. So I am in favor of keeping it open. However, one of the things that I am very concerned about and a responsibility that I have, and one of the first things I did even before I took office, December 30th, I think, it was either New Year's Eve or December 30th, before I was sworn in, is I met with the emergency services team. Because, God forbid, January 1st, my first day of office, there was actually an incident at Indian Point. All of a sudden, I have to make decisions on evacuations and all that stuff. So we drill twice a year that the federal government monitors, or the state government, and we get graded, and we've been, thankfully, got excellent grades on that. So I am concerned about the safety of the plant, but inside, the safety is the responsibility of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Outside, and the evacuation is something that we are concerned about and that we would have you know, concern over, and that's what worry about. But that's something that we also talk with the local communities and deal with. On the Kensico Dam issue, you know, the dam, as you know, was closed after 9/11 as a response to 9/11. I have been very vocal in my opinion that the dam road should be opened. And I have talked to Mayor Bloomberg about it, and we talked with the DEC commissioner about it, and finally, last year, they yielded and have allowed the road to open for pedestrians and bikes again. It is my hope that one day that road can be open for cars again. And look, I've seen the confidential threat assessments for the dam. I've been inside the dam. I would not sit and advocate to open the road if I thought the dam itself or our communities, Mount Pleasant and North Castle, were in jeopardy. And so I've been consistent, and I'll continue to be consistent, that I would like to see that road open. The county is responsible for everything in front of the dam. The plaza, the Kensico Dam, where everyone goes and has fun. That's the county's responsibility. The actual structure itself is owned by New York City, and the water behind it, the 30 billion gallons of water, is for New York City's drinking water, and so they're responsible for that. And so that's where we've had a disagreement with New York City. They want the road closed for their purposes. The other thing that's important to me is the security in the area. There's a lot of security at the dam that you do not know about, nor will you know about, but it's there. But that's something that we're constantly with our Commissioner of Public Safety and New York City always working on to make sure that the security cameras are operating, that the patrols that you see and don't see are there, and the threat assessments. But that dam is pretty well built. I'm more concerned about, schools and shopping centers and those kind of areas as opposed to the dam. Yes, sir.
I had a question. I think I had a question.
Yeah.
Back on your building problems that you have. You stated that that case was in a court,
Which one, the housing?
the housing case.
Yeah.
Was there no special master or judge appointed in that case?
Yes.
What has happened to him as supervisor of the case
Well,
to break up any impasse that the locality?
that has happened. The case is overseen by a federal district court judge who it was assigned to. There was a trial set in November of 2009, and before the trial, the county and the federal government settled. There was no admission of guilt on the county's behalf, by the way, and there was no findings of fact that the county intentionally did anything wrongdoing. But instead of going to trial, the county executive Spano and the county board then decided to reach this settlement. But the district court judge still oversees this case. And there is a dispute resolution that we have followed, by the way, when we disagree with the federal government. There's a monitor, as I mentioned, a federal monitor appointed by HUD, serves at the pleasure of HUD, but this monitor is supposed to be a referee. And so when we've disagreed with the monitor, and we've gone to the federal court. There's a magistrate that oversees as the first step, who gives a binding opinion, and the county or the federal government can appeal back to the federal court judge. So there's a process that is laid out in there.
Another question?
Hi, County Executive Astorino. I've come up from Rye, so I'm not from Armonk, but I got to tell you, driving through here, it looks like a pretty nice place to live, and I might move here. I don't know if you have any affordable housing for me, though. I'm a Rye resident. I've been to, this is my third presentation that you've done. The first one I went to was in Rye. And a large portion of your presentation in Rye involved the issues going on at Playland and the Sustainable Playland Plan. And I noticed that tonight and at the presentation you did in Harrison, you didn't address the issue, although you have touted it as a countywide issue that financially affects everybody, which is true. So I wonder if you can just bring everybody up to speed on what's going on over at Playland and to let us know why the boardwalk still has not been repaired and we still don't have beach access when pretty much every other waterfront community in the tri-state area has managed to get things up and running
No,
at this point in the
unfortunately,
summer
that's not
season.
true. Long Beach this weekend is still demolished.
The Jersey
There are a lot of
Shore is in great
communities.
shape.
Playland, as you know, we have fixed the boardwalk portion, which was the most damage. That is done, and it is,
I was just there today. It's not. It's fenced off and it's under construction.
the boardwalk where the restaurant is open. And that was the most damage, and that was fixed. There are other portions which are going to be fixed, and we wanted to keep public access open as much as possible. Playland. Generally, I always get a question about Playland. I was surprised I didn't tonight, but, you know, Playland is a big issue. Now, before, when I talked about essential services, as much as I love Playland, and I do, and I've been going to Playland since I've been, you know, going to the Armonk Bowl, I have loved Playland, and I still love Playland, and my kids love Playland. So as a father, Playland is the best. As county executive, Playland has some inherent problems in it that need to be fixed. And, you know, over the last several decades, it's sort of been one of these with Playland. It just, don't worry about it, it's a park, let it lose money, it's a nice place to go, et cetera. Well, you know, I'm trying to fix problems here, and one of the problems we have is at Playland. And so we have said, well, how do we make Playland a year-round destination? Because one of the biggest problems is you have an amusement park that's open 90 days a year, and that's about it, other than an ice rink. That's about it. And on a day like this, you got 89 days left. And that's not a business model. Praying for nice weather is not a business model. And so as we look at Playland, this is really what the idea will be, to make Playland a year-round use. And the idea is to have private investors come in. We have $35 million in debt at Playland, which we have to pay back. So Playland automatically loses millions of dollars a year. It costs us, costs taxpayers millions of dollars a year, whether it's open or not. And when it is open, we don't make money. And look, Playland is a great place, but it's become run down, you know, and there are a lot of opportunities for people to spend their money in the tri-state area. So one of the things we want to do is, what do we do with the property to make Playland great? Not just the amusement park. So we went out and we asked the public and we asked private investors, if you can come in, because the county owns it, if you can come in and partner with us, what would you do there? What would be the vision there? And we had 12 proposals. We narrowed it down to really 3 and then down to 2, and we really picked one that we think is the best vision, long-term, has a you know, great ideas, and can work. So what we'll do at Playland is the amusement zone stays the same for the most part, all the historical rides and the Kiddieland rides will stay. Some of the other rides, and most will probably eventually stay, but some rides may not. A couple of the rides near the shoreline, because we want to actually open that up, so when you come, you don't see metal, you actually see the beautiful Long Island Sound. And we have a great lawn where people can just come in, not spend a dime, listen to concerts, just relax, enjoy themselves. And that would be the Great Lawn Zone. The Fountain Plaza Zone, which is where the ice casino is, would be refurbished as well. We would have restaurants there so people can actually go in December or on a rainy day and spend money there and enjoy the scene and just have fun. The Field Zone, we would actually add some outdoor playing fields, which would be used by county residents, and have an indoor field house, which is in big demand. But again, on a rainy day, you can go with your family and do a lot of recreational things in the field house. And the Aqua Beach Zone, where the pool is, that would become like a mini water park, where you'd have some water rides for the kids that, you know, they love that, and that's a great attraction. And so that's the idea for the reinvented 21st century Playland, where it would be much better, positioned for the future, make money, have private investors pour tens of millions of dollars into it, not us, and let them advertise it and work with the county. And that's the idea for the reinvented Playland. Yes, sir.
I'd like to get back to the affordable housing issue.
Sure.
You said that there is a federal court involved.
Yes.
I imagine,
U.S.
or at
District
least
Court.
you have alluded to the fact that there has been appeals to it or issues put before it where the county and the monitor do not agree.
Yes.
What issues have you put before the court? Has the court rendered decisions, and has the court been friendly or not friendly to the county? And is it a one-man?
The one issue where we did have a disagreement was an interpretation issue. There is a law which was just repassed last night by the Board of Legislators, There was one sentence in there that says the county executive shall promote source of income law that was currently before the County Board of Legislators in the fall of 2009. Now, what is source of income legislation? Source of income basically says that as a property owner, you cannot discriminate against a prospective tenant where he or she gets his or her income. Okay, I get that. I'm fine with that. However, Section 8 vouchers, which is a federal program and is currently a voluntary program nationwide, if you own property, you choose to accept Section 8, that's your choice. If you choose not to accept Section 8 and do business with the federal government, that's your choice too. Under this law that was mandated in the settlement, the county must pass source of income law and outlaw that in the county. So the word promote, in my estimation, meant that County Executive Spano did that, by the way, sent a law down to the Board of Legislators that was current at the time, and they did not pass it. New county executive came in, new board came in 2010. And then the board passed a different, very different version of source of income, and I vetoed it. And they went ballistic. Federal government went crazy. That was an issue where we said we don't feel that we must pass this, said to promote it. County executive did that, and the board took no action. Federal government said, wrong, you must adopt this kind of legislation. The monitor agreed with the federal government. We then appealed to the federal magistrate, who agreed with the county. Said, nope, county is not under the obligation, nor is the county executive under the obligation to sign the legislation. He was in his right to veto that. Federal government appealed to the district court judge. She did something pretty rare. She overturned the magistrate. We appealed then to the Second Circuit. They affirmed the decision of the district court judge. I don't know if you got all that, but basically we won one, lost one, and then the final appeal was made to the Second Circuit, and they ruled in favor of the federal government. So with that, then the county board, I was instructed, ordered, to reintroduce the legislation to the county board, which they then passed last night. Legislator Smith voted against it, and they passed it, and now I have 9 days under the court to sign it. That was the difference and the disagreement that we had that I felt very strongly about in the settlement.
It seems like one of the main issues that we brought up tonight is the number of housing units. Where is that now in the system with the federal courts?
Nowhere.
Has it been appealed to the,
No.
why not?
No, on the number of the units that we have to build, 750,
Where they say thousands.
that's not in the courts at all at this point. If for some reason the federal government or the monitor starts issuing opinions that we are under an obligation to do that and more, and I as county executive need to sue our communities to overturn zoning or those restrictions, we'll be back in court real quick. Yeah.
All right.
Rob, could you just give us an update on the Miller House, Washington headquarters?
I thought I was going to get out of here without the Miller House.
I wouldn't let that happen.
Okay, Miller House. When I came into office, we had a $166 million deficit. That was my gift. And we had to figure out how to make that up because we're not raising taxes, so we had to figure out where and how to make that up. The county board at that time passed legislation to bond and borrow $1.2 million to fix the Miller House. I vetoed that legislation. And I said, before we get into that, let's figure out how we're going to actually save the Miller House. Don't just spend money and fix it and not fix the problem, because as you know, where it is a problem. It's near the concrete plant. Nobody goes to the Miller House because it's terrible. It's been in disrepair for decades, by the way, so this is not something that we let fall. But, you know, it's a responsibility. We want to fix it. It's a national historic place. And we have been working now over the last couple of years to work, and since Supervisor Arden got in, we are really working, and we're reaching, hopefully very soon, a conclusion on this, where we're hoping to move the Miller House from its present location, because if it just stays there, we put $1.2 million into it, it's $1.2 million wasted, because nobody's going to go visit it, and it's going to be back into disrepair with the dust and everything else. We want to move it to Fountain Park near Clove Field. I have really bad memories, by the way, of that field because when I was, remember the Kentsko Vikings and Midwestchester Warriors? Remember that? Well, because that's another link, because when I played, when I was in 6th and 7th grade playing Pop Warner, it was combined Armonk and Mount Pleasant. We played together, so a lot of my coaches were from Armonk. But we used to have to run up that hill, which now is probably easy, but you know, when you've got little feet, going up that hill is not easy. So I have very bad memories of that field, but that's probably where we're going to put the Miller House. Because we found a location that the supervisor and the town board identified, and it's a good location. It's still historically on that original property. And we would actually fix it, move it, and then what we're working out now are just the details of what happens after it opens, who's going to be responsible for the maintenance and those kind of things. But there's a lot of movement. It's being done the right way as opposed to just, let's just spend $1.2 million and not figure out what to do with it. So that's where we are at the Miller House.
Thank you.
With that, I want to say thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight. Any questions that you have that you didn't get to answer or ask tonight, please email us, and we'll get you an answer to whatever question you have, whether it's ours or not. But again, thank you for coming out tonight, and have a good night.